Good morning, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us. And I want to take the time to welcome you to the joint webcast by Telegeography and Singtel, Enhanced Internet Backbone for a Multi-Cloud and Hybrid WAN Era. So I am Greg, and together with Gina from Singtel, we are going to be your speakers for today. And of course, if you've ever been to a webinar before, you know we'll have to get some housekeeping items out of the way first. So before we dive into the content, let me just go through a few things about the platform. There are multiple engagement widgets that you can use on your console. So all of these tools are resizable and movable. Feel free to play around with them. If you have any questions for me or for Gina, you can use the Q&A widget, of course. Go ahead and put the questions in while you think of them. Then when we get to the Q&A portion, we'll be sure to address them as best as we can. Importantly, there's a related content widget. So that's where you can download materials to find out more about Singtel services. So we very much encourage you to do that. If you face any technical difficulties during the webcast here, just refresh your browser or log out and rejoin. If you still have some questions there are some common technical questions in the help section at the bottom of the screen if you still need assistance. Lastly, we're going to have some questions at the end. If you could please just take a few minutes to fill out those 3 questions on your screen. That helps us learn more and add value to your business. Also, during the event, in the middle of my presentation, we'll be throwing in some live polls. I highly recommend that you take part in those live polls. It's a really good way for all of us to kind of gauge how you're advancing on some of these topics that we're talking about, and you can get a feel for how the audience compares to the survey that I will be referencing. Okay, so with that, I think we'll get right into the content. And like I said, please do, if you have questions, feel free to throw them into the Q&A widget as we go along, and we'll get to those once I've done my presentation and then done the interview with Gina. Okay. So I'm going to be talking about enterprise WAN in the internet era, an introduction to the hybrid WAN in the middle mile. Based on some work we've done at Telegeography, if you don't know us, we're a research firm totally focused on the global telecom market, and I manage our WAN and enterprise-focused research there. So that's kind of the background for where we're getting a lot of this introduction set up here. So the way I wanted to start us out was to just think about why the enterprise WAN market is moving toward local internet breakouts. And there's really a lot of different reasons that all kind of converge on this trend coming from different directions. One of the oldest reasons, this is the one that's maybe been underway for the longest time. For the past several years, we've seen most multinational corporations moving their data centers off of their corporate premises onto neutral facilities and whatnot. We're going to look at some survey data about that. Of course, I'm sure many of you listening are multi-cloud enterprises, but the majority of the enterprise market has gone multi-cloud as well. So connecting with your cloud service providers is another sort of impetus for the move toward local internet breakouts. SD-WAN uptake has really increased over the past few years. We're going to look at some survey data about that. And of course, once you've adopted SD-WAN, that really frees you up for rethinking your underlay connections. And then why do you think about internet as an alternative underlay connection? Of course, cost always plays a role, right? So internet can allow for bandwidth increases at a lower price point than if you did the same bandwidth increases for MPLS. For that, we're going to look at a hypothetical network that I made to test out some of these different network configurations. Also, broadband plan availability has really changed significantly over the past few years. We've seen a move away from DSL, so we're going to look at some data about that. And then in 2021, you really can't give a presentation without mentioning the global pandemic. Of course, that has had a big effect on all of this, with folks working from home, getting used to using the internet, pushing all their applications toward an internet kind of delivery. Especially, I think important is that we're all getting so used to using Zoom and Meet and Teams and tools like that for our daily communications. I already hadn't touched my desk phone in a long time before COVID, but I certainly haven't touched it in a very long time now. So when we bring all of those very bandwidth-hungry UCaaS services back into the office as we start to trickle in, I have been happy to be going back to the office a couple of days a week over the past few months. And many people around the world are. That's really going to put a lot of pressure on these MPLS networks that were at pretty small port sizes before the pandemic. So I think we're going to see a lot of local internet breakouts added in to deal with that additional bandwidth. All right, so let's take a look at some of this data. So at Telegeography, we run a survey of WAN managers. We have a panel of about 125 IT infrastructure managers from large multinational enterprises around the world. And each year since 2018, we've run a survey of those folks, asking them about their network configurations and various plans for their network. So we asked in 2018 what best describes your data center locations. And I'm going to ask you guys that same question right now. So if you are seeing this and you could take a moment, it would be wonderful to just let us know which of these options fits your current situation the best. We'll compare that then to our survey results. So these options are, you have a mix of on-premises data centers, neutral facilities, and private cloud. You have a mix of on-premises data centers and private off-premises servers. You have a mix of on-premises and off-premises cloud. You have all of your data off-premises or all of your data on-premises. And that's the way that we phrased that question in 2019 to our survey respondents. And I'll wait just a moment here to see what we come up with here. And I can hop back to that. Yeah, it looks like, there we go. I got advanced somehow. So yeah, go ahead and click on the option that best describes that. And then I will show you our survey results. Let me just go ahead and do that, and then as those results pour in, I can see those and pass you back there. So this is what we came up with in our survey. And the thing that I want to bring your attention to, there's a lot of those different options of various mixes of off-premises data center locations. But the real key thing to point out is this all on premises. I'll get my little pointer tool here. So the folks who hadn't moved any of their data centers in 2019 amounted to only a little bit more than 10% of the market. So you had about 90% of enterprises that we spoke to in 2019, or a couple of years ago, that had already moved some of their data centers off premises. So we really see that trend has kind of come to its full fruition there. All right, so then we'll move on to the next survey question that I think sets us up here, that enterprises are multi-cloud. So like I mentioned, a strong majority, it's actually about 75% of the enterprises that we've surveyed have more than one infrastructure as a service partner. We also asked them exactly who they're using. So once again, if you're watching, it would be great for us to be able to see sort of which infrastructure as a service providers you are using. So go ahead and take a moment to do that. I'll hang out on this slide for a minute here so that you have time to do that. And then I'll go ahead and show you our results from our survey. But like I said, the real point here is not as much about the actual infrastructure as a service providers, but that most of the enterprises out there have more than one that they're needing to connect to. And there's a variety of ways to connect most efficiently to your cloud service provider. Of course, it'll be no surprise when we get to our results that Azure and AWS, Microsoft and Amazon are by far the most common selections. We do see folks using, the alternative ones: IBM, Google, Oracle, Alibaba, etc. But the real takeaway, like I said, is that by far we see most enterprises out there are using more than one provider. Yeah, so if you get a moment, go ahead and click one of those. It would be great for us to see as we go through the webinar which of these you have selected. So, and I'll go ahead and show you our results from our survey. We had about 80% of the enterprises we surveyed using Azure and almost 80% using AWS. So obviously, most of the enterprises that we survey are using both Azure and AWS. And again, that comes with a lot of decisions that you have to make about about how you're going to connect to those various cloud service providers. All right, now for our next survey question, we have SD-WAN adoption. So we asked this question in 2018 and 2020. So we have a time series here to see how things have advanced. And it's been a really sort of interesting thing to watch because in 2018, of course, SD-WAN was pretty new. And so we're going to have that same poll question to all of you here. This is very simple. Just what is your stage of SD-WAN adoption? Have you installed it on most or all of the network? Are you still in the pilot or rollout phase? Are you interested in it, but you're still just researching SD-WAN? Or maybe you're considering it, but you haven't really gotten to that stage yet. Or there are some folks out there that are not really thinking about SD-WAN yet, or who have thought about it and have decided against adopting it. That's a pretty small group. We're going to see that when I get to the survey results, but I'll hang out here. So please do, again, take a moment to pick one of these options. It would be great for us to see where all of you in the audience are on this. And then you can compare sort of how you're thinking about it to what we've done in the survey space that we have. All right, so on this one, I've got some answers that have come in. It looks like some of you out there are still in the researching and considering phase. That's perfect. That's why it's great to have you along at a webinar like this, because you haven't already made these decisions and you're at the stage where you can really sort of have a greater impact by thinking about a lot of this stuff ahead of time and in what order and how to do it and that sort of thing. So that's great. All right, so I'll go ahead and show you our survey results. And again, I think this is really interesting in our survey with a span of 2 years. In 2018, less than 1 in 5 of our respondents had already installed SD-WAN. By 2020, that was about 43%, so not quite half. But you'll notice here that in the pilot or rollout phase, another quarter were in the stage of rolling it out in 2020. So by the time we update this question for 2022, which we're going to be doing in the spring, I definitely expect to see a majority of our respondents having already adopted SD-WAN. But that means there's still, let's say, maybe 40% out there who are like a few of you in the audience that indicated you're still in that considering or researching kind of phase. So again, that's the great time to attend these kinds of webinars when you're still trying to figure out what the best way to implement some of these network changes would be. All right, so thanks to folks who participated in that, and we'll be sure to take a look at the results when we're all done here. Now, of course, internet adoption has increased over this time as well. We see here the 2021 data. We're just about to publish this actually in a few days of network configurations. For the past 4 years, we've been asking enterprises around the world what percentage of their sites are running various network services. When we asked this question first in 2018, only about 15% of sites on average were running broadband. Now that's about 25%. Same with DIA, only less than 30% on average were running DIA in 2018. That's now up to 42% in 2021. So pretty strong growth year on year of several percentage points each year of growth in those two categories. So we've definitely seen a lot of local internet breakouts added to the corporate WAN over this time. And corresponding to that, we've seen a change in what ISPs are offering. And certainly, I think this has been a driving factor that, in many cases, especially an asymmetrical DSL service, might not really have been sort of up to snuff for a lot of enterprise use. But you can see here, this is a survey of all the plans that we can find around the world of every ISP. We survey thousands of our ISPs around the world for all of their plans. And in 2018, LAN or fiber to the premises kind of plans were only about a quarter of the plans we see out there. By 2021, they make up around half. And you really are getting those gains by having fewer DSL kind of plans out there. There's also a little bit more cable plans, which also may be sort of more able to handle the kind of bandwidths and reliability that you need for enterprise service. So I think as we see ISPs moving away more and more from DSL, we're also correspondingly going to see more broadband in those corporate networks. Of course, in the previous slide, you'll notice that the enterprises are still leaning towards DIA when they're using internet because it comes with those carrier grade SLAs and uncontended service and symmetrical service. But as we get more fiber to the premises, I think you'll see the broadband increase certainly as well. Now, why, again, is all of this happening? Certainly cost has to be a factor. It always is. So at Telegeography, we have a product called the WAN cost benchmark, and the purpose of that is to look at how much a corporate network should cost. So to test out these different network configurations, I have created this hypothetical 150 site network that touches most of the key business centers in the world, and could be for a variety of sort of industries based kind of on our customers and survey respondents and that sort of thing. And I did that, like I said, just to be able to test different network configurations and see how it impacts the total cost of ownership. So in these examples here, I'm going to start out with a very traditional all MPLS network. It's a dual MPLS network, meaning fully redundant, double access lines at every site, 2 active MPLS ports connected to every site. And most of those connections are in the typical kind of 20 megabit to 50 megabit kind of range. But as we mentioned in the start, if you start bringing in UCaaS services and things delivered to the internet, those bandwidths might start to feel kind of small. So I looked first at what would happen if we increased pretty significantly, around 50%. It turned out to be about 60% across the whole network increase in bandwidth, keeping that same network in place, those dual MPLS connections. And then we're going to compare that to something that we hear a lot of enterprises doing these days, of coming up with sort of tiers of sites, like your gold, silver, platinum kind of sites, where you have maybe your headquarters, your data centers, then your mid-size branch offices, and then maybe sort of points of sale or something like that. And there we apply a mix of, for those really key important sites, 1 MPLS connection and 1 DIA connection from a carrier with all the SLAs and that sort of thing. And then for some of the lower grade sites, some mix of DIA and broadband with, and this is the important part, a fully managed SD-WAN overlay on top of all of that, to then bring in some of that MPLS-like service and take advantage of those active kind of links. Now, down at the bottom there, you see the average megabits per site. The actual number is not really that important. It gets pulled up by the very large ports at data centers and headquarters like GigE and whatnot. But the important thing to see is how that average megabit per site changes in each of these networks. So our starting dual MPLS network, and this is pretty typical of the networks we see out there, have an average of 246 megabits per site. That goes up about, like I said, 60% to 414 for the high bandwidth dual MPLS and 403 for that tiered network. Now let's take a look at what that does to the price of the network. So we're starting out on the left-hand side here with your dual MPLS. You have your MPLS, your access charges, and your CPE, and we're coming out to about 6.2 million US dollars per year. When we add about 60% additional bandwidth, we increase the price about 30%. So you do get some economies of scale in MPLS service. Still, the unit cost does go down, but you're adding $2 million annual spend for this 150 site network. And so that could be a big ask for a lot of IT infrastructure teams to ask for that kind of budget increase. Much more common we're seeing nowadays is this third option, our tiered sites network. We've kept MPLS at those crucial sites. We have DIA for its reliability. There is broadband in here. It's very small. I'm pointing to it right there because the broadband prices are very significantly cheaper than a lot of these other services. And we have added in this managed SD-WAN cost, which is based on the total encrypted throughput per office, right? And even doing that, we come out to about a 7% decline compared to the original network. And this is what we're seeing a lot of enterprises thinking about doing, is saying, hey, I don't need to drastically reduce my network spend, but if I'm keeping it about the same, I'd like a more resilient network that has more bandwidth and is generally more functional. And that's very much what we see here in this hypothetical. Obviously, of course, results always vary, based on your network needs. But like I said, I made this based on some very typical sort of network setups that we see out there in the real world. All right, now in thinking about price, I work at telegeography. We always have a map behind us, right? Geography is very important to the price of your network. So this is a chart showing you the median 100 megabit MPLS plus local access loop charge per month, average across all the cities we cover in each country you see here on the map. And the takeaway here is there's a very, very big range of MPLS prices out there. So you've really got to think about your sourcing strategy when you're dealing with a network that spans multiple countries. Prices for this range from $500 in some parts of Western Europe and whatnot to $32,000 a month in the Middle East and North Africa. Now, what's interesting is here in DIA for the same size port, FastE 100 megabits, on-net DIA ranges considerably, but not nearly as much as the MPLS. That ranges from about 200 to 16,000. So again, your sourcing strategy, very important there. Now, I also wanted to throw in some broadband. These are smaller links, of course. This is 11 to 50 megabit broadband plans around the world. But you'll see broadband prices are definitely a little bit flatter, not a little bit, a lot flatter. They do range, but that range is much smaller, and they don't follow the same exact trends as network services. So the thing with broadband to keep in mind, and we're going to get into this in just a couple of slides here, is that prices may not vary as much around the world, but quality definitely can. So when going to a local ISP in some markets, you might be able to get relatively inexpensive broadband service, but the reliability and quality of that service may vary extremely between sort of some of those smaller ISPs and some larger kind of tier one sort of providers. Same holds true for 51 to 100 megabits, a little bit bigger of a range here, but you can see that that prices are certainly still flatter compared to network services. All right, and that gets you thinking about when you're using, say, a more local ISP. How does that relate to what you need it for, which is primarily, say, connecting to your cloud service providers or your SaaS providers and that sort of thing? So here again, we love maps at telegeography. This is a map of the cloud regions and on-ramps for some of the major CSPs, like the ones we were talking about before, around the world. And I always like to remind any folks thinking about moving to local internet breakouts that you need to have this map in mind and be thinking about how far your traffic is going to be traveling and how many hops it might be taking. We'll get more into that in this next slide here. But this is just a diagram of this portion of the traffic's journey that's becoming increasingly important in this modern internet-first world, which is the middle mile, right? So in an MPLS network, the middle mile wasn't something really that as an enterprise IT infrastructure manager you had to think much about because it was just part of your carrier's network. When you're moving to the internet, the middle mile might be part of a carrier's network if you're using a provider that has that segment. But if you're using, say, a local ISP, it might be trading your traffic off pretty much immediately, and you don't know what's happening to that traffic. So if your traffic is starting here at your local your branch office or your headquarters or whatever, you're going across this local access connection to your co-location. Then there's this sort of cloud of what happens to your traffic here over various ISPs, upstream providers, backbones, before it gets to where it gets handed off to your first mile or your cloud service provider or its final destination. And during that sort of nebulous part in this area, a lot of things can happen. So as we wrap things up here, I just wanted to bring up some of the potential issues that can arise in that middle mile. And that's what I'm looking forward to asking Gina about how Singtel is approaching some of these problems, right? So, first and foremost, if you're going with a very, very local ISP, they're very likely handing that traffic off to other providers very soon in your traffic's journey, going to their upstream providers. And then faults and outages might be even beyond the reach of your ISP. And your ability to resolve issues with that individual ISP are probably going to be very different than a traditional carrier. I just like to remind folks that if you have millions of dollars of spend with your carrier, that's a very different relationship than if you have, say, hundreds of dollars per month of spend with a local ISP, for example. And then lastly, of course, thinking back to that map that we had of the cloud service provider geography, you may not have that sort of visibility into how to optimize your traffic flows between your sites on your network and your cloud service provider's geography. So that's really where someone pulled back from that network with that kind of visibility comes in to be able to make sure that that traffic is taking a sensible path. All right, so you guys have heard enough from me sort of setting the stage here. And now I'd like to invite on Gina Chua, who's the Director of Business Products at Singtel, and ask a few questions about how you guys are thinking about these changes and the best practices for dealing with these changes at Singtel. So Gina, welcome. Thanks for joining.
Hey, hi. Thanks, Greg. It's a great presentation and it's very insightful. And hello, everyone. I'm Gina Chua from Singtel. I'm taking care of the international connectivity such as MPLS and Internet, and I'm happy to join you in this webinar.
Excellent. Yeah. And, like I said at the beginning, I just want to remind everyone to go ahead and if you have any questions that come up as we're talking, feel free to throw them into that Q&A widget there and we'll address them at the end. But first, I get to ask the questions, Gina. So, yeah, I thought I'd just start out with, thinking about those things that we've seen in our WAN manager survey and that kind of thing. In our conversations that I have on, say, the WAN Manager podcast and whatnot. Are you seeing similar trends among your enterprise customers? Have you seen a movement toward adding in local internet breakouts and adopting SD-WAN? And do you see that connection between that? Once they've adopted SD-WAN, they become more interested in adding local internet?
Yes, actually, definitely, because we have enterprise customers introducing internet into their network for their local breakout. And it is an increasing trend as enterprise from all industries need greater network agility to support their digital transformation. So with SD-WAN, it definitely helps to simplify the WAN backbone where they can leverage on the different underlay transport such as MPLS and internet into their branch office. So most of the enterprise have local internet breakout where they can route their workload to the public cloud, deliver a faster user experience for their end users, and reduce the burden on their corporate network. and hence reserving MPLS for their applications, maybe residing in the data centers or for their critical traffic such as UC traffic. So we do see a lot of customers having such trends.
Excellent. Yeah. And, that's a good point with the sort of the UC kind of traffic is that that's the type of application that's so sensitive to the performance of the network. But I find these days a lot of enterprise IT infrastructure managers, their concern is really moving toward the application specific performance rather than what it used to be just, network performance. So I'm wondering, kind of in light of that change, when you engage with an enterprise customer, how do you go about determining with the customer the right mix of underlay products, now that SD-WAN has freed us up to think about that mix, right? And what are the key factors that go into making that decision when you're deciding to sort of move beyond the just MPLS network?
I guess it is very important to engage the enterprise, understand how their network runs in their LAN environment, and choosing the right mix of the underlay, for example, MPLS or Internet, right from the beginning is very important so that we can help to improve access to applications and even the overall IT performance to the cloud. And that is what they are looking for. So first, I think I would like to realign back to what you have presented. I thought it is very important to share that, MPLS infrastructure, the backbone is often owned by a single, hence it's within the carrier control. Network performance is guaranteed, right? And whereas Internet is different, it's made up of different, or rather I would say that it's made up of networks owned by the various ISPs that interconnect globally. So there is no single service provider who can guarantee an end-to-end traffic delivery over the public Internet. The peering points are very important because it depends on how the local service providers interconnect with one another. And hence, this is a common challenge faced by the enterprise where they implement Internet connectivity into their WAN network. I would say that there's no one size fits all across all the sites that spans across the different countries globally. So that's why you will see enterprise having gold, silver, platinum sites where different connectivity comes into picture. Yeah. And,
good. It's good to hear that that my hypothetical works with what you're seeing out there in the world. Sorry. Go ahead, please. But yeah.
And I thought maybe to articulate better, I have a slide to share where how we actually encourage customers to choose the right underlay connectivity. So maybe let me flash a slide over here.
Yeah, great.
All right. So just now I was saying that, we believe in choosing the right connectivity from the start. And there's 3 considerations when selecting your Internet service providers. I think what most important is to first choose the right Internet access plan into your branch office, retail sites, or even hub sites that can support your networking needs. So just now I mentioned the platinum, the silver, and the gold sites. That basically meets implying on that. And the second would be choose the right service provider who has the capability to enhance your Internet routing on the network backbone globally, so that when you hit into trouble, the ISP or the service provider will be able to help you. And lastly, the third point, choose the right service provider with visibility tool that enable you to make sound decision in your ISP selection from the beginning. So real-time network traffic path across the Internet and various carriers is important. Give you insights on how the ISP performance to other ISPs and even to the public cloud. So with the data set, you can actually tell the true performance of the ISP. So that is what I believe is important for the customers when making such decisions.
Absolutely, yeah. I really like that framework, and it makes me think about when we've been talking to enterprises over the past few years that been used to that sort of MPLS environment where they
Yeah.
have one sort of person to go to, and then so I've found that sort of there's sometimes a realization that has to happen of that. Okay, if I move it to the internet with a smaller ISP, that's no longer there. Have you found that your customers are really aware of all those potential issues, the ones that I brought up and the kinds of things you're talking about there with middle mile performance, moving traffic to the internet? Or do you find that there's still maybe some education you need to do there to help everyone understand how all of their traffic is going to perform in the internet first kind of environment?
I would say maybe years back, maybe 2, 3 years back, the customers, the enterprise are less aware of such internet issues. They probably assume that the internet performance is almost on par or not much difference from the MPLS network. But recently, or rather we can see from the RFPs, customers, enterprise are getting more aware, more sophisticated. They know exactly how the internet traffic is, and they are aware of the issues on the internet middle mile performance over time. So they will actually come to us and ask us for advice. It is very likely because enterprise has experienced such intermittent performance issues when they implement the internet connectivity into their WAN network. So it is a little bit tricky. They know that it is very tricky, especially when it comes to public internet. Congestion may happen, traffic rerouting may be inevitable as well. So the resolution time, local ISPs, which you pointed out very correctly, local ISP will take some time, to resolve any of the issues like congestion or traffic rerouting or even peering issues. So they need to have a solution, and that is what enterprise is coming to us.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes a lot of sense, and I definitely agree that there's been that a couple of years ago, maybe when they had never tried out local breakouts, that everyone in the market sort of has learned a lot in the past few years. So if they come to you now and they say, "Hey, Gina, I need local internet breakouts for all of these reasons that Greg's been talking about, right? But I am concerned about middle mile performance, but I still want to move toward adding in internet to my WAN solution." How do you present your solution to them to sort of assuage those fears and let them know that you have the middle mile under control?
Yep, we actually have a solution. Let me show the slide. Yep, we actually have a solution, and over the years we engage with customers. There is still a group of customers who are still relying on the good old setup where they are not moving towards SD-WAN. So when we look at this group of customers, we wanted to understand what is their issues, basically on the middle mile. And they have already introduced internet into their WAN network. They are having a hybrid network. So we offer a solution for enterprise to resolve the internet middle mile issues by using the same local ISP internet access as their last mile. Let them tunnel into our nearest RVPN gateway. So it means that the private backbone now, act as a backup for them. So once the enterprise internet traffic enters into our RVPN gateway, the traffic will now traverse on our private backbone, our Singtel private backbone, which will immediately eliminate any internet variables. And this feature, we are giving it to our customers. Let them self-help on the portal, which is My Connect portal, where IT managers often are the IT managers, where they are able to set proactive alerts on their internet access, where they set they define the threshold, and if the internet connectivity exceeds the predetermined threshold, IT managers will be alerted and they will be able to log into the portal, activate the tunneling back to our network so that it will just smooth out the performance for the customers, making sure that their users on the other end using applications or having any traffic to the UC, there isn't any problem on their network anymore. It will be consistent for the customers. And this is very important because internet is always unpredictable. Having such on-demand service available for them, it's very good for them to resolve any issues immediately.
Yeah, absolutely. That is a really interesting way of attacking this problem. So thanks for sharing that with us. All right. So then just lastly, if I'm sitting here as an enterprise IT infrastructure manager, what would you recommend that they sort of look out for chiefly as they go through this transformation project of towards a software-defined network and towards adoption? What do you think are the real key things that they need to be thinking about?
I guess it is the right approach, or rather I would say that in conclusion, the right approach is very key. In Singtel, where we engage the customers, we approach the 3R approach, where having the right design and solution, which is very important. We put together a robust design solution that's designed for the different customer requirement, not just the underlay, but overlay as well, so that they are able to make sure that the traffic flows to the public cloud smoothly. So that's one. The other R, the second R, will be having the right infrastructure. We have the suite of connectivity solutions from MPLS to internet to optimize the network performance for the customers and making sure that they have the visibility and control on the management. So that's very important and that's key. The third part would be the right operations, right people, right skills to enable your network to continue to adapt and grow, and we are able to support any business changes that customer has. So that is very key. Network design is never stop at implementation. Having the right people to maintain, to manage for you is important.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really good point. And thinking back again, that every network is different. Every network's needs are different. Yes. and different within that network. And so being able to go to a provider where you can really think about how to make that solution tailored to your exact needs rather than trying to piece it all together yourself, I think can be a real difference in making this transformation work, certainly. So. Excellent. Well, Gina, thank you so much. That was super interesting. We are kind of running low on time actually here, but we do have a couple of questions. So I will read those off. The first one is directed to me. So it says, Greg, your hypothetical included a managed SD-WAN service. Is that what most enterprises are selecting? So as it happens, we have asked this question in the survey. We certainly talk about it with the enterprises that we speak to as well. In the beginning, so when we go back to enterprises in 2017, 18, back then, we saw a lot of folks going with an unmanaged solution, the early adopters. That really switched over in the last couple of years. I think the strong majority of enterprises adopting SD-WAN now are going with at least a basic kind of co-managed solution, with a lot of them choosing a sort of premium, fully managed solution. So I think even some of those early adopters, maybe having tried it out themselves, are moving to a fully managed. There will always be the place for the folks who have the team and really want to maintain control. But we've definitely seen it move toward a sort of fully managed solution as SD-WAN adoption has increased. And I think in cases, sort of like the scenarios you're describing, Gina, there's a lot of sense in having all of that unified with your underlay solution as well. In that sense, rather than having to try to sort of make all of that work together and orchestrate it yourselves. So that's a good question. All right. And then one more. Okay, so for you, Gina, it says, and we saw this kind of in some poll results, which is interesting, that we had some folks answer our poll that they were just in the sort of considering SD-WAN stage. This question says, Gina, we have not yet adopted SD-WAN. Do you recommend that we do that first before moving to local internet breakouts and a hybrid network, or do that all together?
I think it depends. It depends on the different enterprise network design and traffic profile. Because once enterprise starts to move their workload to public cloud, they will see a shift in their usage for internet and MPLS. And for manageability of the different underlay links, it is definitely recommended to have a single overlay where you can have consistent policies, configurations, better manageability on the different underlay network. So I would say there's no right or wrong, but if it really depends on the enterprise network design and traffic profile. Yep.
Yeah, Gina, I say that all the time when people ask me questions about all of this. It always depends, but it is something that you want to think about ahead of time and really sort of understand before you just jump in and see what happens, right? So.
Yep, not jumping into the wagon. Yes, you're right.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, that is all that we have time for. I want to thank everybody in the audience for joining us. It was great to have you along, and of course, if you have additional questions, we would be happy to sort of answer those. Gina, thank you so much for the insightful discussion. Before everybody leaves, please do take a few minutes to answer those 3 questions on the screen so that we can learn more about you and sort of figure out how to add value to your business. If there were questions that we didn't get to that you've put into the question widget, we will certainly try to get back to you about those. And you see this QR code is this link to download materials. You want to take a closer look. Please do take advantage of that in the materials widget. Okay, so that's all that we have time for today. I thank you all again so much for joining us, and we hope to hear from all of you in the future as well. So have a good day, everybody. Thanks.
Thank you.